Welcome back, chosen ones. When a lion finally roars, it doesn't send an apology letter to every creature it once went silent for. It roars because it remembers. And today, you're about to remember something deep, something that may validate the version of you that's rising, or confront the version of you that still plays small in the name of keeping the peace. Let me warn you now, this message won't sit well with your past. It will either empower your evolution or expose all the spiritual discounts you gave away just to feel accepted. But either way, this is where your clarity sharpens. You see, the world wasn't truly shocked by your growth. They just never thought you'd have the nerve to enforce it. They signed up for the you who was always available. The version of you who said yes even when your soul screamed no. The one who gave spiritual gold at the price of crumbs. But something divine happened. You woke up. And when you did, you didn't just build boundaries. You built a spiritual firewall with divine facial recognition. Not everyone gets in now. The energy has changed, and they feel it. The old access code expired, and baby, you're not resetting it. The ones who used to drain you now walk up to your peace like it's a locked vault, whispering, "Wait, who is this?" Same soul, new standard, and no, you're not available for a downgrade. What they call attitude is actually just your aura in high definition. What they label too much is really just you finally reclaiming your space, your voice and your throne. They're flinching like you committed some crime, but all you did was stop letting them rob you emotionally while smiling to your face. They're shook, not because you've changed. They're shook because you're not returning to the version of you they built their comfort on. They didn't plan for this. They didn't see this version of you coming. The one who walks away with peace, not pain. The one who doesn't flinch in silence. The one who no longer plays emotional caretaker to people who never asked how you were really doing. And here's the truth. This isn't even your final form. So buckle up, beloved. This message isn't just about boundaries. It's about the divine becoming that's got people nervous, confused, exposed, and strangely obsessed. Because you're not acting brand new. You're not acting bitter. You're just finally acting like someone who knows exactly who the hell they are. Before we dive all the way in, let me take a moment to say thank you to every one of you who supports this space through Super Thanks. Your kindness fuels more than you know. It allows messages like this to keep flowing with full fire. But even if you never donate, you are still deeply appreciated. Just being here, growing with us, and walking in your light, that's everything. Now, if your soul is already nodding, if your spirit is whispering, "This is me," drop 777 in the comments right now. Let that number be your declaration, your signal to the universe, your affirmation that the chosen one within you is wide awake and never going back to sleep. Let's get into it. You ready? God's chosen ones. People are shocked by the new you. They never saw this coming. Number 1. You became the gate, and now they're begging for the access they once abused. Chosen one, let's be honest. There was a time when you stood outside doors, heart in hand, waiting for people to love you, right? Waiting for recognition, waiting for inclusion, waiting for validation you should have never had to beg for. Do you remember that version of yourself? The one who would bend, shrink, and silence their truth just to be tolerated. The one who whispered their worth in rooms where they should have been announced with thunder. You remember, don't you? But then something shifted. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but in revelation. Something sacred broke open inside you. Not a breakdown, but a breaking through. You didn't snap like a branch, no. You expanded like a wildfire. You stopped seeking entry because you realized you are the gate. You stopped knocking because you realized they don't hold the keys, you do. What happens when the ones who once thought they had you figured out suddenly face the new version of you they can't predict, control, or manipulate? What happens when you become the judge of access and they're left stuttering at a gate they used to walk through freely? Are they upset because you've changed, or because they never believed you had the power to? As Proverbs 4:23 reminds us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And you, chosen one, finally started guarding yours. You didn't build a wall out of pride. You built a boundary out of wisdom. You realized that open doors without discernment become revolving doors for chaos. And now you stand not as a doormat, but as a divine threshold. Take, for example, Oprah Winfrey, who was once dismissed and demoted for being too emotional for TV news. She once sat outside the gates of opportunity, begging to be accepted. But when she realized her voice was the door, she stopped knocking. She built her own stage and made the world come to her. Are you not walking a similar path? Why is it that the same people who once ignored your worth are now furious that you've redefined your value? Could it be because your boundaries now highlight the very entitlement they tried to disguise as affection? They were never truly comfortable with your soul, only with your silence. They liked you better when you needed them more than they needed you. But chosen one, what they never saw coming was your internal courtroom, the one where you put every soul, every interaction, every intention on trial, not out of spite, but out of spiritual discernment. And once the verdict came in, you revoked access without apology. As Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment you shall condemn." That includes the tongues that used to whisper lies into your heart, hoping you'd stay blind. But now you see. Look at Taylor Swift, who went from being publicly humiliated at award shows to taking full control of her narrative. She didn't fight to stay in rooms that disrespected her. She created her own. And now the same industry that once mocked her watches in awe and fear as she owns everything they once tried to steal. Isn't that the power of becoming the gate? Chosen one. They're not just shocked by your absence. They're wounded by their irrelevance in your new world. You see, when you stopped shrinking, you started shining. And when you started shining, you exposed shadows they thought would never be seen. Have you noticed how quiet they got once you stopped reaching out? How cold they became once you stopped tolerating the heat of their chaos? Isn't it strange how the same people who were once your biggest supporters became your fiercest critics right after you set them free? That's what happens when divine alignment replaces emotional dependency. As Romans 12:2 urges, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And that's what you did. You renewed your mind and transformed your access points. Do you remember Chadwick Boseman? For years he quietly honed his craft, saying no to roles that disrespected his essence. When he stepped into the world as King T'Challa, the world bowed, not because he begged, but because he embodied. He understood that not every opportunity is worthy of your presence. That's a chosen lesson. And now people are offended, not because you're rude, but because you're selective. They feel entitled to the old version of you, the one who would let them in just because they showed up. But now, as Matthew 7:6 wisely warns, do not give what is holy to dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine. You understand that your spirit is sacred, and you no longer give access to those who treat it like it's common. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt, once considered just the first lady behind the scenes. But when she stepped into her own voice, challenging injustice, confronting racism, and speaking truth to power, she became one of the most influential forces of her generation. Her boundaries created a platform. Yours will too. So now, they stand outside the velvet rope of your life, confused. How did I lose access, they wonder. But the truth is, they never lost anything. They simply refused to rise when you ascended. You're not punishing them, you're protecting yourself. As Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers." You've stopped walking in step with dysfunction, and now the crowd has changed. Think about Selena Gomez, who took a break from fame, endured public heartbreak, and came back with her own narrative, her own health, her own peace. She didn't come back to prove anything. She returned because she found herself, and now she decides who walks with her. So, chosen one, the real question isn't why did they leave? It's why did you ever think you needed them to stay? You were the light all along. You were the gate. You are the judge now, not to condemn but to discern. And as Ephesians 5:11 commands, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Your elevation is exposing what they hoped you'd never see, that their power was built on your permission. And now that you've revoked it, they are scrambling. Stay in your clarity. Stay in your boundaries. You don't have to chase, convince, or plead anymore. You're not at the mercy of those who once mistook your grace for weakness. You're the chosen one, and from now on, access is earned, not assumed. Number 2. Your no is sacred now, and it sounds like thunder to those who once thrived off your silence. Chosen one, can you feel how your no carries a different weight now? It's not just a word anymore, it's a spiritual sound wave, a protective wall, a holy verdict. There was a time, wasn't there, when your no came out soft, laced with hesitation, almost apologetic. You'd offer it like a whisper wrapped in guilt, terrified it would upset someone, push them away, or make you look difficult. You feared rejection, not realizing you were already rejecting yourself to keep others comfortable. But that version of you, long gone, dead and buried. What rose in its place is someone divine, someone resolute, someone whose no is no longer a murmur, but a mirrored reflection of God's order. When you say no now, it's not rejection, it's alignment, it's clarity. It's a bold declaration that your soul will no longer be discounted. Have you ever noticed how people flinch now when you refuse to accommodate them? Have you seen the panic in their eyes, not because you were cruel, but because you were clear? Why do you think your no triggers such discomfort in those who once manipulated your kindness? Like Jesus in Matthew 5:37 said, "Let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything more comes from the evil one." That's spiritual authority. That's the divine echo now embedded in your boundaries. Your words no longer tremble, they tremor. Consider Princess Diana, whose life was once molded by the expectations of royalty. She said yes to roles, titles and rules that never truly served her essence. But when she began to say no to injustice, to image manipulation, to silent suffering, it shook an empire. Her refusals weren't rage-filled, they were radiant, and the world took notice. That's what's happening to you. Your no doesn't just block access. It cleanses the energy. It exposes entitlement. It forces people to sit with what they once ignored, that their access to you was a privilege, not a birthright. So now, they stand confused, hurt, offended. But why are they so shaken by a simple boundary? Could it be because they were never prepared to meet a version of you who loved yourself more than you feared their judgment? As Isaiah 30:15 declares, "In repentance and rest is your salvation, in quietness and trust is your strength, but you would have none of it." Your strength is now found in stillness, in certainty, and it is deeply unnerving to those who once fed on your uncertainty. Chosen one, your no is no longer an invitation for negotiation. It's anointed refusal. It requires no apology, no long-winded explanation, no softening to be more digestible. You don't translate it into something more palatable. It just is. And that makes you dangerous to those who used to thrive in the cracks of your self-doubt. Think of Maya Angelou, who endured abuse and racism, silenced for years until she found her voice. And when she said no to staying silent, her voice roared across generations. Her no didn't destroy, it delivered. It freed, not just herself, but others who didn't know they were caged. Your no does the same. You're no longer playing peacekeeper at the expense of your soul. You finally realized what the world didn't teach you soon enough. Peace without boundaries is not peace, it's performance. And you're done performing. They say you've changed. But let's ask the deeper question. Was it really change, or was it finally clarity? Now when you say no, it doesn't just stop someone from crossing a line. It reflects the energy back to them. It makes them look at their dependency on your compliance, their reliance on your confusion. Your no forces them to deal with themselves, and that's why they lash out. Like Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 6:3, who responded to his enemies, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down." That's you now. Not from arrogance, but purpose. You're too high in frequency to stoop for validation anymore. Consider LeBron James, criticized for leaving teams, building his own brand, and choosing rest over playing for approval. His no wasn't rebellion, it was restoration, and it changed the game, literally and symbolically. Your no is doing the same in your life. It's restoring order to chaos that once called itself connection. What used to be your weakness, your inability to say no, is now your greatest shield. And this isn't about revenge. This is about protection. This is about prevention. This is about preservation of your light, your calling, your energy. As Psalm 141:3 says, "Set a guard over my mouth, Lord. Keep watch over the door of my lips." You finally set that guard, not out of fear but wisdom. And now the wrong ones find themselves locked out, not because you're cruel, but because you've become clear. Think of Rihanna, who turned down record label control, refused to be boxed into a single sound or brand, and said no to exploitative contracts. The result? She built an empire on her own terms, with her no becoming the foundation of her billion-dollar identity. She didn't yell, she just walked differently, and the world followed. You, chosen one, now walk differently too. Your refusal is not rebellion, it is reverence for what God placed in you. Your no is not cruelty, it is compassion for your own well-being, and you owe no one access to what drains your soul. As 2 Timothy 1:7 reminds us, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." And that's the spirit that fuels every boundary you set now. So let them be shocked, let them fumble, let them gossip, let them misunderstand. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your evolution is not for their entertainment, it's for your assignment. This is your power now. Your no is not rejection, it is redirection, it is sacred, and it is final. Number 3. You didn't just heal, you became spiritually encrypted, and now your presence can't be decoded by those with hidden motives. Chosen one, let's tell the truth. Healing wasn't a cute aesthetic for you. It wasn't a highlight reel filled with wellness retreats, affirmations, or filtered Instagram quotes. No, your healing was warfare. It was brutal, silent, and sacred. You didn't just bandage the wounds, you went deep into your soul's wiring and rebuilt your entire internal system from scratch. Why? Because survival was no longer enough. You were born for spiritual sovereignty. Have you ever wondered why your peace now feels like a fortress? Why your presence no longer invites chaos the way it once did? That's not coincidence. That's the firewall you installed around your soul. You don't just have boundaries anymore. You have filters, discernment layers, energetic firewalls that scan every vibration before it gets too close. As Proverbs 2:11 tells us, discretion will protect you and understanding will guard you. And now understanding is your gatekeeper. You don't let people walk back into your life like they didn't leave footprints on your healing. They're met with spiritual encryption. They can't decode your silence. They can't figure out how to manipulate what no longer reacts. Take a moment and think. Who's most frustrated by the new you? Isn't it the ones who are used to pushing your buttons and watching you break? What happens when those same people now find that their tactics hit a firewall instead of a wound? Selena Gomez, after years of dealing with toxic relationships and the harsh gaze of the public eye, didn't just disappear, she rewired. She built quiet boundaries and stopped explaining herself. When she returned, she came back as a woman who didn't react, only redirected. That's spiritual encryption in action. Now, you do the same. You sense energy shifts before words are even spoken. You catch manipulation before it finishes forming. You don't need proof anymore, you operate on divine instinct. That's why your silence is terrifying to those who once fed on your confusion. What if your old openness wasn't kindness? It was a trauma response. What if being so understanding was just survival mode disguised as generosity? As Ephesians 6:11 commands, put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. And that's what you've done. The armor isn't just external anymore, it's coded into your discernment. Now you're not reacting, you're rejecting. Not from fear, but from spiritual firmware that's been updated through fire. Look at Steve Jobs, a man who was once fired from his own company. He didn't come back with resentment. He came back with reinvention. He didn't need validation anymore. He had clarity. That clarity changed the entire world. You're not so different, chosen one. You walked through rejection, betrayal, loneliness, and instead of staying broken, you evolved into someone too advanced for manipulation to reach. Let's be honest, some people aren't mad because they lost access. They're mad because they lost control. And what confuses them most is that you didn't announce this new version of yourself. You just stopped responding the way you used to. No yelling, no warning, just silence. And silence, Chosen One, is your most powerful spiritual language now. People try the same guilt trips, passive aggression, backhanded concern, but they get no traction, no reaction. Why? Because you're no longer functioning off emotional wounds. You're operating from spiritual wisdom. Have you heard of Naomi Osaka? At the peak of her tennis career, she walked away from interviews, from pressure, from expectations because her peace mattered more than her public image. That's not weakness, that's divine strength. That's what your firewall looks like now. And it confuses people. They'll call you distant, cold, changed. But here's the truth they'll never say aloud. They miss the version of you who didn't know better. The one who answered every message, showed up for every crisis, tolerated every insult disguised as love. But now you don't confuse being kind with being available. You don't let people prove their loyalty with lip service. You watch for alignment. You wait for consistency, because you know that not everyone who smiles at you is safe for your soul. As Matthew 10:16 reminds us, be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. You're not walking in suspicion, you're walking in wisdom. You're not guarding yourself out of fear. You're guarding something holy, your peace, your purpose, your light. Consider Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, misunderstood, betrayed, and yet he emerged not bitter, but evolved. He didn't give the same version of himself to a world that had mistreated him. He emerged with internal strength that couldn't be negotiated, and it shook nations. You too are no longer trying to be understood by everyone. You're too focused on making sure you understand yourself. That self-clarity is a divine compass. It shields you from external chaos. You don't rush to explain your peace. You don't dilute your discernment to soothe discomfort. You stand in your knowing and let the noise fall away. And the truth is, most people only ever had access to you because your spiritual security system was under construction. But now, your firewall is active, your intuition is sharp, and your light is no longer on open access mode. As 1 Peter 5:8 reminds us, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. You're no longer easy prey. You've become an encrypted spirit in a noisy world, and only the real, the aligned, and the authentic can sit with you now. Think of Beyoncé, whose career went from girl group fame to global sovereignty. You don't see her responding to noise. You don't see her explaining her boundaries. Her system is tight, her energy is sacred, and her silence speaks volumes. She doesn't need to be loud when her frequency does the talking. Chosen One, your new level of discernment may not be loud, but it is loudly effective, and it's not about hating people, it's about loving yourself enough to guard what heaven entrusted to you. Your firewall isn't arrogance, it's alignment. So let them call you different. Let them feel disoriented. Let them wonder why they can't find the version of you they once knew. The answer is simple. That version no longer exists. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not closed off. You're consecrated. This isn't just personal growth. This is divine transformation. And now, only those with pure hands and clean hearts can access the temple of your presence. Number 4. You became the mirror, and now they flee from their own reflection. Chosen One, let's make one thing clear. You didn't lose people because you became toxic, bitter, or arrogant. You lost people because you woke up. And in waking up, you became something they couldn't manipulate, mold, or mute anymore. You became a mirror, not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals. You became a reflection of truth so sharp, so unfiltered, that it shattered the illusions others were clinging to. And not everyone can handle that kind of exposure. Have you noticed that your peace unsettles people more than your pain ever did? Why is it that your silence now screams louder than your apologies once did? Could it be that you've stepped out of the roles they assigned you? The fixer, the forgiver, the emotional sponge, and into the truth of who you were always meant to be. As 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image. When you walk in clarity, you don't just reflect truth, you radiate it. And truth has a way of making liars, manipulators and ego-driven souls deeply uncomfortable. Let's be honest, many people weren't in love with you. They were in love with the version of you who would always say yes, always clean up the mess, always take the fall. But once you started reflecting rather than absorbing, the game changed. Your growth didn't just redefine the dynamic, it exposed it. Think of Meghan Markle, who was adored when she smiled silently and followed expectations. But the moment she spoke her truth and stepped back from the toxic roles imposed upon her, the world either applauded her freedom or resented her refusal. She didn't become a villain. She became a mirror to a system that thrives on silence. You too have interrupted the pattern. And when you interrupt a pattern, you expose the addiction. That's why your presence is now treated like a threat. Not because you're cruel, but because you're clear. You're not performing anymore. You're not dimming your light to make others feel more secure in their shadows. As Ephesians 5:13 declares, "But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light." Your growth brought light, and light does not apologize for exposing darkness. It simply exists, boldly, brilliantly. Some of the people you distanced yourself from weren't confused by your clarity, they were terrified of it, because your refusal to enable their dysfunction stripped away the lies they told themselves. Lies like, "I'm a good person because someone still forgives me," or "I'm not toxic, they're just too sensitive." But what happens when you no longer absorb their poison or play along with their excuses? That's when they start calling you too much or too cold. But in truth, your boundaries are simply the absence of self-betrayal. You're not heartless, you've just stopped volunteering for soul-draining assignments. Look at Keanu Reeves, a man who lives quietly, rarely justifying himself to critics or industry voices. He's been called distant, mysterious, odd. But in reality, he's a mirror. His humility, silence, and energy reflect back what others fail to possess. That's what you've become, a reflection that forces others to confront the gap between their performance and their truth. When you no longer rescue people from the consequences of their own patterns, they accuse you of abandoning them. But what if the real issue is that they were never meant to be rescued, only revealed? As Proverbs 27:2 reminds us, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. You're no longer reflecting flattery, you're reflecting reality, and that reality is a threat to anyone still hiding behind performance-based affection and transactional relationships. Consider Michael Jackson in his later years. As he grew more outspoken about his experiences and sought to protect his inner world, the same public that once adored him became divided, some defending his humanity, others demonizing his detachment. The deeper truth, his light reflected both the brilliance and the hypocrisy of a world that wants access without responsibility. Chosen one, you didn't stop loving people, you just stopped overextending for those who made your love a one-sided contract. You stepped out of the narratives they cast you in, the scapegoat, the silent supporter, the cushion for their chaos. And when you left the role, they had to meet themselves. And most people aren't prepared for that kind of meeting. Now, when you say no, you're not just denying a request, you're disrupting an illusion. You're not just setting a boundary, you're forcing people to realize how dependent they were on your unconditional yes. And that kind of awareness burns. It convicts, it exposes. As Galatians 4:16 says, "Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? The truth you carry in your energy is not always spoken, but it is always felt." That's why people pull away. That's why they whisper, criticize, or disappear. Not because of what you did, but because of what your presence now represents. Remember Jim Carrey, once seen as just the funny man, who later began speaking openly about spiritual awakening, mental health, and divine identity. The world didn't know what to do with his transformation. His words reflected a deeper layer of truth, and those addicted to illusion found him strange. But the chosen saw him as awakened. Chosen one, you are not cold, you are not heartless, you are not too much, you are a clear reflection of what they've been avoiding. Your eyes now see through pretense, your spirit no longer plays pretend, and your clarity is confronting. So don't shrink, don't explain, don't apologize for being the mirror. You're not the villain, you're the exposure. You're not the problem, you're the awakening. And as Hebrews 4:12 declares, "For the word of God is alive and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart." That same sharpness now flows through your presence, not to harm, but to reveal. Let them run, if they must. Let them retreat from your frequency. What they're fleeing isn't you, it's the part of themselves they buried long ago, the part that cries when truth arrives, the part that hides when light exposes. And you'll keep reflecting, because you didn't become the mirror to be admired, you became the mirror to remind the world what truth looks like in human form. Number 5, you're triggering people because you finally stopped bleeding for their comfort and now they're exposed by your boundaries. Chosen one, have you ever noticed that your peace became a problem only after you stopped being the emotional scapegoat? You didn't become mean, you didn't turn cold, you simply decided that your suffering would no longer be a landing pad for other people's dysfunction. And that shift, that sacred decision, it triggered people, not because you're broken, but because you're finally whole. For years, you were the one holding it all together. You bit your tongue so others wouldn't have to hear the truth. You carried the weight of everyone else's chaos while yours went ignored. You silenced your pain to protect their comfort. You dimmed your glow so they wouldn't feel insecure in your light. But now you see it for what it was, self-abandonment, masquerading as loyalty. Why do they act like you're the problem now that you've stopped playing small? Why does your healing trigger their guilt? Could it be because they were only comfortable with the version of you that stayed silent? As Galatians 1:10 says, "Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ." You were never called to be everyone's emotional cushion. You were called to be set apart. Look at Simone Biles, one of the most celebrated athletes in the world. When she withdrew from Olympic competition to prioritize her mental health, the world was divided. Some praised her, others attacked her for refusing to perform through her suffering. But her refusal to bleed for public approval lit a fire. It revealed how addicted the world is to watching people stay strong while silently crumbling. That's what's happening in your life too. Now that you've reclaimed your space, your peace, your spiritual authority, people are rattled, not because you've done them wrong, but because they can no longer manipulate your empathy. They can no longer rely on your silence to shield them from accountability, and that disarms them. Your refusal to break for their comfort is a declaration, I am no longer the sacrificial lamb in your emotional drama. You're not here to save grown people from consequences. You're here to walk in the fullness of who God made you to be. Think of Robin Williams, whose laughter masked a depth of pain few ever understood. He gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left. The world mourned him, not just because he was funny, but because we finally had to confront how often we demand performance while ignoring pain. Your life is demanding the same reflection from those who once drained you. Now you don't flinch when someone throws a guilt trip your way. You don't scramble to fix things you didn't break. You don't dilute your truth to preserve someone else's illusion. And that silence, that refusal to fold, it echoes. It reveals their emotional laziness. It shows them the cracks in their maturity they've tried to cover with your sacrifice. As Psalm 118:6 boldly declares, "The Lord is with me, I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?" You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood, left out, or labeled too much. Because you know now, it was never about being too much. It was always about being too aware. Take Frida Kahlo, a woman who lived in pain but never used it to please others. Her art reflected truth. Her silence held power. She refused to smile through torment for the sake of comfort, and history remembers her not as broken, but as fearless. That's the energy you carry now. People say you've changed, but what really happened is that you stopped changing yourself for people who refused to grow. You stopped cushioning their dysfunction with your compassion. You stopped setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Now they feel exposed. Why? Because your boundaries shine a light on how much they relied on your self-neglect. When you were quiet, they never had to reflect. When you said yes to everything, they never had to face their entitlement. Now, your no is a sermon. Your distance is a mirror. Your silence is confrontation. As Proverbs 29:25 says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." You're no longer performing for approval. You're walking in divine freedom, and that makes people who are still trapped in emotional manipulation very uncomfortable. Think of Prince Harry, who chose to step away from royalty tradition and public expectation, not to rebel, but to protect his family's peace. His decision triggered global backlash, but in truth, it was a boundary, a line drawn in spiritual sand. No more suffering for show. You've drawn the same line in your own life. Chosen one, you're not asking for too much. You're just no longer settling for too little. You're not mean. You're meaningful. You're not arrogant. You're aware. And people who loved the version of you that tolerated everything won't know how to handle the version of you that demands respect. You're no longer in their circus. You don't argue with clowns. You packed up your emotional stage and took your light with you, and now they sit in the dark, surrounded by echoes of their own chaos, wondering where the peace went. But you never took their peace. You just stopped renting yours out. As Isaiah 43:19 says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" You are the new thing God is doing, and they may not perceive it, but that doesn't stop it from growing. Your boundaries are blooming. Your silence is sacred. Your refusal to bleed is your revelation. So let them be triggered. Let them call it selfishness if they must. You know the truth. It's not selfish to protect your soul. It's survival. It's sacred alignment. And it's what happens when a chosen one finally realizes that martyrdom was never part of the divine plan. Number 6. You no longer seek to be liked. You demand to be met with truth. Chosen one, do you remember the old version of yourself, the one whose presence quietly whispered, "Please like me," not because you were desperate for attention, but because you were still unlearning the lie that love had to be earned through sacrifice? The you that bent until you broke just to be included. You weren't being fake, you were surviving. You were trying to prove you were worthy of being loved without being reduced. So you gave too much. You tolerated inconsistencies. You excused disrespect. You stayed when your spirit screamed to leave. But then came that moment. Maybe it was a betrayal that cut too deep, a heartbreak that left you empty, or the final tear that fell when you realized someone only valued you when it was convenient for them. Whatever it was, it flipped a switch. And when that switch flipped, your entire spiritual posture changed. As Romans 12:2 reminds us, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's what happened to you. Your mind got renewed. You stopped waiting for validation, and you started requiring alignment. You're no longer out here asking to be liked. You're not shrinking your light so others won't feel insecure. You don't soften your tone just to be digestible. You don't trim your intensity to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You've become a fortress, not hardened but disciplined, still full of love, but now laced with discernment, still kind but now wise. Think of Lady Gaga, once ridiculed for being too much, too weird, or too extra. She stopped apologizing for her eccentricity and turned her uniqueness into a global platform. She wasn't begging to be accepted anymore. She made the world come up to her level. Isn't that what you're doing now? How many times did you sacrifice your intuition for the sake of being agreeable? How often did you explain your worth to those who only listened when they were ready to take something from you? Now the same people who once breadcrumbed you with half effort feel blocked by your energy. Their ghosting doesn't bring you anxiety anymore. It earns them permanent dismissal. The passive-aggressive comments, the fake concern, the guilt-laced manipulation, it all fails now, because your spirit no longer runs on confusion, it runs on clarity. You don't decode mixed signals anymore, you delete them. You don't chase people who can't show up with consistency. You don't bend for fake vulnerability. If they can't come correct, they don't get to come at all. As Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord." You've chosen to walk a different path now, one where access to your presence requires truth, consistency, and spiritual integrity. Take Rihanna, who unapologetically walked away from the expectations of the music industry to build Fenty and live on her terms. She didn't vanish, she evolved. And those who once thought they could play her now watch her move with elegance and authority. You're following a similar rhythm, chosen one. People now say, "You've changed," but they miss the truth. You didn't just change, you returned to your original power. And now, every interaction with you has a filter. Every invitation is weighed against discernment, and every room you walk into is measured for spiritual safety, not popularity. Let me ask you this: who still tries to trigger the old version of you, hoping you'll react? And who's confused now that their tricks no longer work? As Isaiah 33:6 declares, "He will be the sure foundation for your times, a rich store of salvation and wisdom and knowledge." That's who God has become to you, and that's who you've become to yourself, a foundation, not a faucet. You're no longer the overflowing river for those who refuse to dig their own wells. You don't explain your worth anymore. You enforce it. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. And alignment always offends those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Look at Michelle Obama, a woman who remained poised, powerful, and principled in the face of constant criticism. She didn't seek approval. She walked in self-respect, and the world had to rise to meet her. You're now that version of yourself, the one who isn't asking to be seen. You see yourself. You're not pleading for love. You embody it. You're not auditioning anymore. You've already been appointed. Number 7. You're not acting brand new. You've just remembered who you really are. Chosen one, let's get one thing straight. You're not acting brand new. You're not pretending. You're not being fake. You've simply returned to your original design, the version of you before the world told you to shrink, silence yourself, and play small. You're no longer begging for a seat at tables you were meant to lead. You've stopped dimming your brilliance to soothe the egos of those who feared your power. And yes, your shift has people talking. Let them. They'll say healing made you cold. They'll say success changed you. But the truth, you finally dropped the mask. You stopped faking humility for people who confused your quiet strength with weakness. As Ephesians 14:24 reminds us, put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. You've put on the self that was always in you, but now you wear it boldly. No more adjusting, no more begging, no more explaining your soul to people committed to misunderstanding you. Think about Miley Cyrus, criticized for breaking away from her childhood image. But her transformation wasn't rebellion, it was reclamation. She stopped being a palatable version of herself and chose authenticity over approval. That's what you've done too. You used to carry other people's emotions like they were your own. You used to be afraid that setting a boundary would make people abandon you, but now you've realized that if someone can't handle your wholeness, they were never qualified to stand beside your destiny. Are they mad that you've changed, or mad that you're no longer accessible to their dysfunction? As Luke 10:16 says, "Whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me." You're not acting superior, you're just no longer available for emotional squatters. The people who only brought you chaos wrapped in charm, expecting space without value, their lease is up. You've stopped chasing closure, stopped begging to be understood. You finally understand yourself. And that is more than enough. Consider Colin Kaepernick, whose stand for justice cost him his career, but awakened the world. They didn't hate him because he was wrong. They hated him because he was right and unshakable. That's the discomfort you now bring when you stand in your truth, unapologetically. And the ones who once called you too emotional, too much, too intense, now can't reach you at all. You're not rude, you're real, you're not distant, you're discerning. Your frequency has changed, and not everyone is equipped to hear it. As Matthew 5:14 reminds us, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. You're done hiding. You were never meant to blend in. You were built to stand out and stand firm. Look at Zendaya. Once the sweet Disney star, now a powerful private force in entertainment. She doesn't overshare. She doesn't over-explain. She doesn't make herself small. She lets her presence speak for itself. And now, she's respected because she respects herself. That's the kind of energy you've stepped into. Let them talk. Let them twist your transformation. You don't owe anyone softness at the expense of your soul. You're not bitter. You're just done bleeding to keep others comfortable. Your peace is non-negotiable. Your power is rising. And your new posture isn't for show. It's for survival. So the next time they say, "You've changed," smile and say, "Thank God." Because chosen one, you didn't evolve to prove anything. You evolved to become everything God already declared you were. Number 8. You chose yourself, and they've never been more disoriented by your clarity. Chosen one, for so long, your love looked like sacrifice. Your loyalty looked like silence. Your care looked like self-erasure. You gave and gave until there was nothing left but the echo of your own exhaustion. You chose them over and over, even when it cost you your peace, your sleep, your boundaries, and sometimes your identity. But the real shift, the one that rattled them to their core, was not when you yelled, not when you exploded, but when you finally chose yourself. And that, chosen one, is what they were never prepared for. Have you ever wondered why they seem so shaken by your peace now? Why your boundaries look like betrayal to them? Could it be because they got so comfortable with a version of you that sacrificed everything for connection, even your soul? As Matthew 22:39 commands, love your neighbor as yourself, not instead of yourself, not more than yourself. You finally understood that choosing you is not rebellion, it's divine balance. People aren't used to seeing you protect your energy. They're not used to you saying, "No, I can't," and meaning it with no follow-up apology, no nervous smile, no half-hearted explanation. They were never expecting the version of you that walks away without looking back, without crumbling, without guilt. Take Adele, for instance. At the height of her fame, she stepped away not to disappear, but to heal, to protect her peace. She returned stronger, clearer, unapologetic, and the world had to adjust. You too have stepped into that kind of strength where your self-respect finally speaks louder than your people-pleasing ever did. You're not burning bridges out of bitterness. You're letting them collapse naturally when you stop being the only one maintaining them. You were doing the emotional labor for connections that couldn't carry their own weight, and now that you're off duty, they feel the loss. They feel the imbalance. Let me ask, how many times did you say yes when your soul screamed no? How many times did you abandon your truth just to avoid awkward silence or rejection? As Proverbs 4:7 reminds us, wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. And now you understand that real love doesn't require self-betrayal. Real connection doesn't demand your silence in exchange for belonging. You stopped setting yourself on fire just to keep other people warm, and that's not cruelty, it's reclamation. Consider Demi Lovato, who openly shared their story of overgiving, emotional collapse, and eventual healing. The public that once celebrated their performance had to learn to respect their boundaries because they began choosing themselves above their image. And that terrified people who only knew how to consume, not honor. Your shift was never about becoming cold. It was about becoming clear, and your clarity now functions like a sword. It divides, it exposes, it liberates. They're confused, not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving you. As 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, "When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." You're not playing the emotional caretaker anymore. You've outgrown being the glue in broken relationships, and now you're walking in wholeness. Think of Beyoncé, whose visual album Lemonade wasn't about revenge. It was about awakening. It was the unveiling of a woman choosing herself, her truth, and her healing above all else. And just like her, you've stopped playing small so others can stay comfortable. They're not mad because you hurt them. They're mad because you stopped letting them hurt you. They're not outraged because you cut them off. They're stunned that you no longer make them your priority when they treated you like an option. And now, chosen one, your silence is louder than your sacrifice ever was. Number 9. Your detachment isn't coldness, it's a sacred verdict they didn't expect. Chosen one, your detachment is not cruelty, it's consequence. It's not bitterness, it's wisdom wrapped in silence. The truth is, they never thought you'd walk away. Why? Because for so long your love came wrapped in over-explanation. Your loyalty looked like over-functioning. You tried to prove your worth with your emotional labor, but no matter how much of yourself you poured in, they never saw the value because they never intended to. So now you've gone quiet, and that silence, it cuts deeper than any confrontation. You didn't slam the door, you just closed it and locked it with discernment. As Ecclesiastes 3:7 says, a time to be silent and a time to speak, and you finally embraced the holy power of your silence. Let me ask, how many times did you explain yourself to people who twisted your truth? How long did you stay in rooms that fed on your empathy but starved your soul? Now, when they look for the old you, the one who would chase, plead, overfunction, they find distance, stillness, and worst of all for them, no access. You've become like Greta Garbo, the legendary actress who walked away from fame, saying only, "I want to be alone." It wasn't a tantrum, it was a boundary. Her detachment wasn't a punishment, it was a declaration of self-worth, just like yours. You don't argue anymore because you understand that anyone who needs your pain to validate your truth was never listening to begin with. You don't fight for closure anymore because your exit was your explanation. As Proverbs 17:27 declares, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even-tempered. You've become even-tempered, reserved, unavailable for chaos wrapped in charisma. You've traded drama for discernment. When you left, you didn't just exit the room, you took your spiritual supply with you. The emotional fuel they siphoned from your presence gone, the validation they stole from your softness cut off. Look at Dave Chappelle, who famously walked away from a $50 million contract. His silence spoke louder than any interview. People said he was crazy, but he was correct. He detached to protect his truth. You've done the same. And now, chosen one, your absence haunts every shallow conversation, every fake connection, every manipulative soul that once feasted off your light. You're not being petty, you're being precise. As Isaiah 30:15 says, in quietness and trust is your strength. You've weaponized your stillness, not to destroy, but to deliver a message. You had access and you abused it. Now you get silence. Think of Prince, the artist who changed his name, reclaimed his work and refused to be a puppet in the industry. His detachment forced the world to respect his spiritual sovereignty. You've done the same with your energy. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson, but your leaving became the lesson. Your detachment isn't passive, it's active discernment. It's spiritual wisdom clothed in grace. It's the verdict to a trial they didn't realize they were part of until it was too late. So let them sit in it. Let them wrestle with your absence, because you're not being cruel, you're being clear. Your silence is not a pause, it is a full stop. And to every soul that misread your compassion as weakness, your detachment is now the mirror, showing them what they lost. Number 10. You stopped letting "I love you" become a password to your soul. Chosen one. There was a time when the phrase "I love you" was enough to disarm you, enough to make you soften, to let your guard down, to welcome people back in after they crossed the very boundaries you set to protect your heart. You weren't naive, you were hopeful. You wanted love so deep and real that you gave people a front row seat to your soul just because they whispered affection. But now, you've grown, and that growth has come with a new spiritual filter, a divine firewall against false love dressed in sweet intentions. You've seen what fake love looks like up close. It's fluent in charm, but silent in accountability. It says "I care" right after abandonment. It says "I'm here" right after it disappears. And over time you realized, this isn't love. This is emotional negotiation dressed in poetry. So now you don't just listen to what people say, you watch how they handle you when the answer is no. You pay attention when your needs aren't convenient. You notice the shift when the spotlight isn't on them. As 1 John 3:18 tells us, "Let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." Love without action is no longer convincing to you, and affection without accountability, you see it for what it is, manipulation with perfume. Let me ask, how many times did you silence your discomfort just to keep a connection alive? How often did you confuse apologies for actual change? Think of Whitney Houston, a voice loved by the world, but behind the scenes, she was entangled in a love that consumed more than it healed. Her story reminds us that not every "I love you" leads to peace, and not every connection is rooted in God. You've learned to recognize this too. That's why now, your boundaries speak louder than your explanations, and you don't feel guilty for enforcing them. People used to sneak past your defenses because they knew the right things to say. They built emotional bridges with empty words. But now, those bridges don't lead anywhere because your gates require more than charm. They require consistency. If someone's love folds when you ask for honesty or buckles when you draw a line, it's not love, it's control. As Proverbs 27:6 says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." You no longer fall for affection that avoids accountability. You understand now that real love grows inside of boundaries. It doesn't try to erase them. Consider Chadwick Boseman, a man who quietly endured physical pain while showing the world what integrity, strength, and humility looked like. He didn't demand love through performance. He let his character speak, and the world honored him for it. You now move in that same rhythm. You're not impressed by grand gestures. You're moved by truth. You've finally stopped fighting to be understood by people who only say they love you but show otherwise. You don't argue anymore. You don't beg anymore. You observe, you discern, and if they can't meet you where you are, you disconnect. They're shocked, not because you became mean, but because you stopped bleeding for their comfort. You're no longer defending your peace. You're just protecting your throne. And if someone can't handle the strength of your wholeness, they were never worthy of your vulnerability. As Isaiah 54:17 declares, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you." That includes emotional manipulation wrapped in fake affection. You are covered, you are aware, and you are no longer giving access to those who demand love but refuse to earn trust. So let them call you cold, let them say you've changed, you have, and you've done so beautifully. Number 11. You stopped explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Chosen one, how much of your peace have you lost trying to be understood? How many late nights did you spend writing texts, replaying conversations, or crafting explanations that fell on deaf hearts? There was a time when being misunderstood felt like death to your soul. You just wanted to be seen rightly, known deeply, and heard completely. But now, you've outgrown the need for approval disguised as clarity. You no longer beg people to see the real you. You just live as the real you and let the truth sort itself out. Have you realized yet that some people never wanted to understand you? They didn't miss your heart. They dodged it. Because your truth exposes their denial. Your evolution disrupts their comfort. Your clarity ruins the script they had prepared for you. As John 8:32 says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." But here's the twist. Truth also offends those committed to illusion. So now, you don't fight to be seen anymore. You stand in the light and let those with eyes to see, see. Look at Malcolm X, whose message was powerful, provocative, and constantly misunderstood by those who refused to listen beyond headlines. He stopped explaining his evolution. He stopped diluting his truth. And in that stance, he changed history. You too have reached a point of sacred detachment. You know who you are now, and you trust that clarity more than any rumor. You've realized that many people misjudged you on purpose because the real you broke the illusion they wanted to keep. So you stopped handing out explanations to those who only listen to respond, not to understand. Let me ask, How much emotional labor have you poured into defending yourself in stories where you were never meant to be the villain or the savior? Now, when people twist your silence into arrogance, you don't flinch. When they misinterpret your boundaries as hostility, you don't react. You just keep walking, because your peace is not up for debate anymore. As 1 Peter 2:23 tells us, when they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. You've entrusted your story to God, not gossip. You've released the burden of being understood to a higher court, and that's why you sleep in peace now. Think of Greta Thunberg, the young climate activist who was ridiculed, mocked, and dismissed for her message. She didn't stop to explain herself to every critic. She let her mission speak. You now operate on that same wavelength. Your life speaks louder than your defense ever could. You don't give presentations anymore. You don't audition for approval. You're not rude. You're rooted. You're not distant. You're disciplined. And those who are meant for you, they will feel your authenticity without needing a slide deck to prove it. As Proverbs 26:4 wisely states, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him." You don't play defense in games that were always rigged. You don't clarify to those who distort. You don't perform for those who only clap when you shrink. And the beautiful part, your life keeps revealing the truth. You are your own evidence now, and that truth, it's enough. Number 12. You realized being too nice was the most dangerous way you betrayed yourself. Chosen one. Have you ever worn your kindness like a shield, believing it would protect you from betrayal, heartbreak, or disrespect? For a long time, you thought being nice was your superpower. You were the one who stayed late, who forgave too fast, who gave too much, even when your soul whispered that it was costing you more than you could afford. You smiled through discomfort. You said yes when your spirit screamed no. But now you know the truth. That version of nice was not protection. It was self-abandonment. You weren't being kind. You were overextending. You weren't practicing love. You were performing survival. You were silently hoping that if you poured enough love, enough patience, enough time into people, they would finally see your value and return it. But they didn't. Not because they couldn't, but because your unconditional availability made them feel no urgency to rise. As Proverbs 25:26 says, "Like a muddied spring or a polluted fountain is a righteous man who gives way before the wicked." You gave way too often, and they took that as a green light to continue draining you without accountability. Let me ask, how many times did you confuse being easy to love with being easy to use? How often did you call it compassion when it was really compliance? Look at Princess Diana, beloved by many but often caught between duty and self-sacrifice. Her public image was the people's princess, yet behind the scenes she battled alone, giving endlessly while rarely receiving the same grace. It wasn't until she began to speak her truth that people saw she had been bleeding behind a smile. You too have peeled off that mask. You realize that being endlessly nice in the face of mistreatment is not grace, it's neglect. Not of them, but of you. You were making excuses for people who never made space for you. You were bleeding so they could stay full, and all the while you thought that was what love demanded. But then something in your spirit cracked open. You understood that kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's a void. As Galatians 5:1 declares, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." You've stopped being enslaved to the need to be good in everyone's eyes. You've stepped into freedom, into discernment. Now your kindness has conditions, not bitterness, balance. You require accountability. You expect mutual respect. You give where it is earned, not where it is demanded. You say no without guilt. You walk away without offering a 3-paragraph explanation. And the ones who benefited from your self-sacrifice, they call you selfish now, but that's only because they miss the version of you who didn't know how to protect yourself. Consider Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most humble souls. His quiet presence radiates peace, but he doesn't overextend. He doesn't perform for approval. His kindness is clear, but it comes with boundaries. You now live in that same spiritual lane, peaceful but not permissive. Your shift is not cruelty, it's emotional maturity. You still love deeply, but now you include yourself in the equation. You still give, but now you check your cup before pouring. Because love is not about letting others feast while you go hungry. Love is about nourishment on both ends. As Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless. You've learned to defend the most oppressed part of your life, your own neglected soul. And now, you've retired from being the emotional life raft. You're no longer the backup plan, the fixer, the one who absorbs all the pain and asks for nothing in return. You are discerning, you are sacred, you are God's chosen, and that comes with a spiritual standard. Number 13, you became the boundary because your peace is no longer public property. Chosen one, you used to be an emotional sponge. You soaked up everyone's moods, absorbed every jab disguised as a joke, internalized every tension in every room you walked into. You thought being strong meant holding space for everyone's chaos, even when it was eroding your soul. You were the one people vented to, leaned on, cried to, but when you needed rest, there was only silence. You thought saying yes was how you proved love, but now you know that wasn't love. That was emotional martyrdom. You have since transformed. You are no longer a sponge, you are a filter. You no longer let everything in. You don't absorb trauma that doesn't belong to you. You don't internalize projections. You don't answer every call or carry every burden. You have become a living, breathing boundary, and it is your holiest transformation yet. As Matthew 5:37 teaches, let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything more comes from the evil one. Your no is now a full sentence. Your silence is now sacred. Your presence is no longer open access, it is invite only. Let me ask, how many people mistook your openness for emptiness? How many times did you confuse being needed with being valued? Look at Rosa Parks, who was not loud, not aggressive, but firm. Her quiet refusal to give up her seat changed history. She set a boundary, and that boundary sparked revolution. You're doing the same in your own life. You're not explosive, you're just done being everyone's emotional dumping ground. People are shocked, offended, quiet, but it's not because you changed overnight. It's because they never imagined you'd stop accepting what never belonged in you. You've detoxed from codependency. You've deleted the belief that love equals constant availability, and now that you've become selective with your spirit, few qualify. As Psalm 101:7 declares, no one who practices deceit will dwell in my house. No one who speaks falsely will stand in my presence. That verse lives inside of you now. You don't make room for deceit masked as confusion. You don't entertain emotional manipulation dressed as concern. You feel it, you name it, and you walk away from it. Consider Anthony Bourdain, who traveled the world but always had clear boundaries around his authenticity. He let others in, but never allowed the public to control his narrative. His space was sacred. Yours is now too. You're not rude. You're not closed off. You're clean, spiritually hygienic, emotionally aligned, and you no longer let every wandering soul knock on your door and call it love. You no longer confuse trauma bonds with connection. You no longer bleed just to prove you care. Now, your peace is not a group project. Your space is not a rescue mission. Your soul is not a community center for unresolved pain. You don't speak every language anymore. Boundary is your new tongue. And the ones who can't speak it, they were never meant to commune with your frequency in the first place. As Nehemiah 6:3 reminds us, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. You can't come down to chaos anymore. You can't unlearn what God has revealed. You are on assignment, and that assignment requires clarity, protection, and sovereignty. So stand tall, chosen one. You are not being unreasonable. You are being refined. You are not being difficult. You are being divinely defended. You are not building walls. You are building gates with purpose. And now only the aligned may enter. Number 14. They're not afraid of losing you. They're haunted by the truth that they already did. Chosen one, it's not your distance that's unsettling them. It's your disappearance in spirit. It's the reality they never thought they'd face, that they didn't just lose access to your time, your heart, or your conversation. They lost you entirely. And the most haunting part, it didn't happen during some loud fallout or dramatic moment. It happened quietly, subtly, in the stillness of your awakening. You didn't slam the door. You simply walked through it and never looked back. You see, they were never truly afraid of losing you. They were afraid that the old you had finally woken up, the one who tolerated mixed signals, the one who stayed loyal to illusions, the one who kept making room in their heart for people who only brought emotional debt. That version of you, the one they took for granted, is gone. Not bruised, not bitter, but buried. And there will be no resurrection. Have you noticed their energy lately? The lingering glances, the subtle reach-outs, the quiet checking in. It's not love, it's panic. It's the slow realization that you're no longer circling back. And why should you? As 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here." You didn't just change, you were transformed. And true transformation isn't seasonal, it's eternal. Let me ask, how many times did they confuse your grace for weakness? How many times did they return to your life thinking the door would always be open? Look at Tina Turner, who endured years of abuse before finally walking away, reclaiming her power and never looking back. She didn't make a scene, she made a decision. And from that decision came legacy. You've made that same kind of decision, chosen one, not from anger, but from clarity. They stalk your presence now, not because they want to reconnect with your spirit, but because they miss the control they once had. They scroll through your updates, watching from afar, searching for signs that maybe, just maybe, you're still reachable. But you're not. You're not busy. You're not thinking. You're not taking space. You're gone. As Isaiah 43:18-19 declares, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" You're not trying to rehash or revisit. You're aligned with something new, something holy, something permanent. They're not mourning your presence. They're mourning the fact that your absence now carries weight. And they didn't expect that. They thought you'd always wait, always come back, always give just one more chance. But what they didn't understand is this. Your absence is not silence. It's a sermon. Your detachment is not a phase. It's a finality. Because when you finally saw the truth, the lies hidden in smiles, the patterns masquerading as growth, the way they expected everything while offering little, you didn't just react, you evolved. Think of Frida Kahlo, who painted through pain, who transformed betrayal into brilliance, who turned abandonment into artistry. She didn't need people to validate her process. She simply created from it, and the world noticed. You now walk in that same power, not louder but clearer. They say you've changed, and yes you have, but not out of revenge. You've changed because self-respect became your anchor. Your nervous system no longer lives in hope, it lives in peace. As Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." And that's what you're doing now. You're guarding your heart not out of fear, but out of alignment. You don't hold space for people who didn't know what to do with it when they had it. You don't chase clarity from those who offered confusion on purpose. Let me ask, why were you always the one waiting for the apology, the change, the realization? And what happened when you finally realized that moment was never coming? That's when you stopped hoping. You stopped explaining. You stopped bending. You didn't close the chapter. You burned the whole book, because it was written by people who never understood the plot. Consider Barack Obama, calm under pressure, steady in storms, never reacting wildly, but always moving with intention. He didn't waste words trying to win approval. He knew who he was, and his presence became the answer, not the argument. You now walk with that same elegance, silent, yet powerful. They're haunted, chosen one, not because you yelled, but because you didn't. Not because you begged, but because you won't. The calmness in your energy speaks louder than any confrontation could, and they know what it means. You saw everything. You saw who they really were, and you didn't make excuses. You accepted it. You adjusted. You ascended. As Job 22:28 says, "You will also decree a thing, and it will be established for you, and light will shine on your ways." That's your life now, a declaration of sovereignty, a boundary wrapped in glory, a presence that no longer asks to be respected, it simply requires it. Look at Serena Williams, who walked away from tennis, not because she was done, but because she was fulfilled. She didn't need applause, she needed alignment. She wasn't waiting for permission, she moved with purpose. And so have you. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't need anyone to understand your why, because your evolution was the answer. And evolution, once complete, doesn't turn around, it only ascends. So when they say, "You've changed," say yes, and thank God I did. Because chosen one, they're not afraid of losing you, they're just now realizing they already did. Chosen one, you've made it. Not just to the end of this video, but to the beginning of a new reality where your spirit is no longer negotiable. You're no longer swayed by emotional theatrics, guilt trips, or the subtle manipulations that once held you hostage. You've outgrown the need to explain, the urge to prove, or the habit of shrinking to fit someone else's limited view of you. You don't chase anymore. You observe. You don't beg for clarity. You embody it. And when someone pulls away, you don't panic. You simply make peace with the silence. Why? Because you've learned that solitude in truth is far holier than company in illusion. What once looked like detachment now feels like divine protection. What once felt like loneliness now feels like sacred stillness. You no longer rescue what was never yours to save. You don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You've stopped explaining the fire inside of you to those who were only ever afraid of its light. You have become the boundary, the mirror, the final consequence of years of spiritual suppression. And now, they are left not just watching your evolution, they are forced to sit in the space your absence created, a space they thought would never exist. But you're not there anymore, not emotionally, not spiritually, not vibrationally. And the beauty is, you're not angry, you're not bitter, you're free. Thank you truly for walking this journey with me today. Your presence here means more than you know. Whether you sat in silence or shouted yes at the screen, you were part of this message. And if you felt seen, heard, or validated in any way, I want to honor that. I also want to thank each of you who have supported this space through Super Thanks. Your generosity allows me to keep producing these messages from the soul. But even if you never donate $1, know this, you are still deeply appreciated. Your energy, your growth, your presence is the real gift, always. And now, I want to speak a blessing over your journey. May God continue to surround you with divine clarity, sacred peace, and unshakable boundaries. May your discernment remain sharp and your heart remain soft, but never unguarded. May every space you walk into be shifted by your frequency. May the right people recognize your value, not by what you give, but by who you are. May every soul who once overlooked you see clearly what they lost, and may you never lose sight of what you found yourself. You're not rising by accident. You're rising on purpose with purpose. And if this message touched something deep in your spirit, don't leave quietly. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that choosing themselves isn't selfish, it's sacred. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications. This isn't entertainment, this is soul work. This is for the ones evolving in silence and rising in power. This is for the chosen. Welcome to your next level. God bless you, abundantly, boldly, and without apology.